Hello, everyone. If you have your Bibles, we're taking our text today from Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1. I'll give you a chance to turn there. And this is the lesson for Sunday, April the 5th. And I would like to thank everyone who's taken the time to view this. I hope you found last week's lesson useful, informative, helpful, encouraging. And today is today's lesson is a nice not part two, but it definitely connects. It's also a lesson that's going to hopefully help us adapt and make it through this special, interesting, crazy, scary time. Yeah. And if you're turning there and you're noticing the background around you, you'll see that everything's pretty much the same. I had this room really all ready to go by last week. The only addition, you might notice the plush bear, over my shoulder there. And that bear has significant emotional value to me. That bear is actually made from one of my grandpa Scott's old shirts. I say old, the shirt was in very good condition, evidently. But he was really real fastidious. He really kept his clothes up nicely, and he really would dress himself to the utmost for church and things. And that the body and the head of the bear are actually made from one of his shirts. Someone had the wonderful idea. I'm sure one of my cousins had the wonderful idea, knew somebody who did that sort of thing, to create memorial objects. And they took several of his shirts and to that person and paid to have them made into those plush bears to give out to different family members. And that's also one of his ties on the bear. So that has sentimental value to me. Yeah, when I look at it, I can even remember him wearing that shirt. So very neat idea. If you happen to have a loved one or a friend who passes away, it may be something that you could take advantage of. There are a lot of cool options like that out there nowadays. Anyway, let's turn to Ecclesiastes 3:1, and it reads as follows. And this is probably the most well-known chapter in Ecclesiastes. So I'm sure you've heard this verse mentioned before. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Okay, let's ask the Lord to bless the word, to anoint it, and allow our ears and heart to accept and hear it, and be made better and encouraged and inspired by it. Lord, we love you this moment, and we're so happy to be coming together, even though it's not ideal. But you've provided ways. There are ways where we can actually connect. We want you to take this word, quicken it to our hearts, so that we can be made better and be encouraged and take action through its teachings. In Jesus' name, amen. Today's title is High Horses on the High Seas. High Horses on the High Seas. And I said this would be a nice follow-up to last week's lesson, which was surviving the good ship quarantine. So you'll see that I'm still persisting with a nautical theme. Well, here we are, another week into this new reality. Another week into seclusion, another week into living on the good ship quarantine. And a month ago, we could not have envisioned being here, living this way, and society and our lives changing the way they have. We came from a different reality. I remember when we started hearing about the coronavirus, in China on the news, and it was interesting. Yeah, another thing in China, another bird flu, another SARS, and then it was spreading across the world, and it still seemed like, oh wow, this could be interesting. But we were taught. I remember being at meetings and meeting other people and casual get-togethers and talking about this, and it still seemed like an academic conversation, something that's interesting, something to pay attention to. And within weeks, a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, all of a sudden it was here, and society was coming to a screeching halt here in America too. But for a short moment, I want you to think back to the way reality was before, when this reality was still some fever dream, something that was not ever going to happen to us. I want you to think of how we viewed each other. I want you to remember how we acted toward others. Remember how we took in the news. Remember how we saw our fellow Americans. We were living in a time, we knew it, of ultra polarization, a process that began years and years and years ago. There's always been some, conflict and tribalism and debate in America and around the world, I suppose. But we know instinctively that it's been getting worse and worse over the last really 15, 20 years at least. In the last handful of years, last 4, 5, 6 years, it has become, the thing that defined our national discourse and the way we thought about our nation and our world. And I don't want to seem naive, as if I am implicitly suggesting that somehow all that has gone away, because I know better. I know we don't change our habits and change our ways and change our views overnight, despite the fact that we're being thrust into a brand new way of life. So some of that is still here. And yet we can tell that some of those things we were thinking about, some of those things that were driving us, that were consuming us, maybe, hopefully it wasn't consuming, the people that are listening to me right now, but chances are it was probably consuming some of us. Even now, some of those conversations seem secondary. Some of those concerns, the things that we were getting angry about, getting frustrated about, not wanting to talk about, or wanting to talk about all the time, however you were responding and reacting, all of a sudden those seem very, very low on what matters, on the list of priorities of surviving. And so we're entering a new reality, whether we want to or not. And I want to tell you something. I have heard more than one person say this, and I have said it myself. When we come out of this, and we will, but when we do, the world will have changed. The world after this pandemic will not be the same place that it was before. It's going to forever change. We are living through one of the most probably cataclysmic, paradigm shifting moments in human history right now. And when those kinds of things happen, humankind has historically done badly at adapting. It has failed to adapt except through pain and loss and death and bloodshed, and really the adaptation process has really come after the event happened, when we were left and forced to pick up pieces. Now, I think one thing that makes this unique is just how globally connected we all are digitally like this. And for the first time, we're trying to respond intelligently to coordinate efforts more than ever before than in any other global crisis or pandemic. But we're getting a lot of that wrong. We're going to get a lot of that wrong because you can't respond to a new paradigm efficiently and effectively and get it right 100% of the time. You just can't, because you can't help but approach it with the old rules in your head still. You can't help but approach it with the old tools still in your hand. So that's going to happen. And that's what I want to draw your attention to for this lesson today. This reality is so different and alien that we're still figuring it out, but it's so different. It's as different living now, living through this is as different as it is as living on land is compared to living on the sea. I want you to think about that. Think about how different the pattern of life has to be if you are a person who lives on a ship versus a person who lives on land. Those two things are so foreign. The landscape is not a landscape anymore. Your patterns, your day-to-day patterns have to be more flexible and adaptable as the weather patterns change, whether or not the sun is up. Nothing is rooted or grounded. You have to know how to go with the flow or you die. So we are being forced from a world that was more static and overly polarized into this new pandemic reality. And I want to tell you that the old rules and the old ways, a lot of them, a vast amount of them, are not effective anymore. And maybe not even ineffective, but could even be dangerous. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." This is a brand new thing. You better let go. We better let go. I better let go of some old ways of doing things if we're going to survive. Now, the title is High Horses on the High Seas. High horses, we're familiar with the cliche, someone got on their high horse, right? And we use that when we're talking about someone whenever they take a position and they get up there and their righteous indignation is at maximum, and they are letting the world know how wrong everyone else is and how right they are and how justifiably angry they are. That's a typical position to be in the old world. High horses are a common attribute or a common mode of transportation in the pre-pandemic world. We were living in a land full of people riding their high horses. And there are certain skills that are useful in that world. There are certain methods by which you successfully and effectively ride your high horse. Riding your high horse meant you needed to be good at arguing your points and finding the holes in the other guy's points. That's a skill that was valued. It's a skill you worked on and you honed, and you listened to others who agreed with you and you adopted their ways of doing it. Riding your high horse meant being good at arguing your stuff while only seeing the ineffectiveness or the inefficiencies or the inequities or the inconsistencies in whoever you oppose. Useful skill for riding a high horse. Maybe not so useful anymore. Another skill that's useful for when you're riding your high horse is being good at quickly and efficiently identifying in someone's speech or in someone's appearance when they were on your side or the other side. Handy for surviving in an overly polarized, highly tribal existence. Handy for whenever there was enough real estate for us to spread out and have our own camps. Maybe not so useful on this very narrow deck of the good ship Quarantine, of separating into sides and being good at identifying who belongs where and keeping them out and keeping yours in. Another skill that makes a very successful high horse rider is being good at finding and joining your herd, at finding your group and secluding yourself away and purging out anyone else who doesn't fit, who maybe rides at a different gait than you do. Those are all valuable skills if riding a high horse is the thing that you do best. But it doesn't stop there. Whenever you exist in a certain reality over an extended period of time, whenever you do certain things, you work a certain job, or you talk with certain people, you work in a certain field, any place where you exist a long time, habits that help you survive there become natural and subconscious. You're not aware you have them, but you do, and because they fit, they naturally manifest and develop just from having to live a certain way in a certain place amongst certain people doing certain things. So in all those times when maybe you were riding your high horse, you probably developed the tendency to feel that your view from way up there in that saddle was higher, was superior, was the right and proper one. You probably innately, without realizing it, have been convinced in just how proper your view is of things as you look down upon all the other views and perspectives. Proverbs 14:12 says, however, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. When you ride in a horse's saddle for a long period of time, when you live there and you become really good at riding that high horse, you become accustomed to moving at a certain speed. You become accustomed at rushing to judgment. You become good at riding hard, at galloping roughshod over others who seem to be going the wrong direction across your path instead of with your path. Whenever you've spent a long time up in that high saddle, you can become, to refer to an ad campaign that has come out in the last few years that I think is hilarious, you've become nose blind to the stink of your own beast. Yeah, that's the problem with riding high horses. You ride them and you're around them so long that you can't smell whenever it's gotten pretty nasty. You can smell the other guys. His horse has an alien scent to you. His way of doing things is fresh and raw when you first see it. You can see the alienness of it, and when he's ugly, and when he cuts you off, and when he's short-tempered with you, and when he doesn't hear what you have to say and dismisses you, you detect that quickly. But man, when you've been riding yours for so long, it gets hard to separate the smell of that thing from the smell of you. Now, not everyone who's been living in the land where high horses gallop so rampantly has been riding high horses themselves. There are some people who have realized that this high and mighty way of viewing people who disagree with you, they have realized that that's not a good way to live. That's not a Christian way to live. That's not a fair way to live. It's not an honest way to live. And so perhaps I'm talking to someone today who, instead of spending the last several years as the galloping went on around them, instead of riding, you've just been trying to survive the chaos that all these high horse riders were creating. And you've developed some skills for surviving in that kind of place. Surviving in a land where high horses gallop everywhere with their iron shod hooves. Well, one of the skills you need is the ability to seclude yourself from everyone who loves to ride. And I don't blame you. I have found myself over the last few years being in both positions. I've found myself being one of those who likes to get up in the saddle. I'm aware of that tendency in myself, and so I actively keep pulling myself back off of that high horse position. And what I found is I found myself in the other position of, okay, I'm down here, and though I'm trying to avoid being one of those that love to rush about and take positions and look down upon everyone, and though I'm trying to keep myself down out of that position, now I've got to watch out that I'm not run over by people who are still up there in that saddle. And so one of the ways that I've done it, one of the ways that maybe you've done it, is you've learned how to seclude yourself. You've learned how to carefully protect how much exposure, how much availability, how much interaction and contact you have with people. Mark 1:35 says, rising very early in the morning while it was still dark, the Lord departed and went out to a desolate place. And there he prayed. And maybe that was been you. Maybe you've been in a desolate place with all the thunderous sound of this group rushing at that group and back and forth. Maybe you've found a desolate place to meditate and pray and try to survive. You know, the problem with that place, though, while it protects you from being trampled, it's still desolate and it's still lonely. But that's one skill you have to have when you're living in such a land. Another skill for surviving in a land where so many are galloping about on their crusade to right every wrong that they see in the other person. Well, you exert a lot of effort focusing on the narrow strip of real estate that you've staked out as home. You build fences and walls really high. You carefully protect that little section. You convince yourself you're satisfied to exist on that little piece of turf. You say, I'm contented to see no more, to go nowhere else, to only interact with these people, to only watch these programs, to only read this material, to only hear these voices. I'm content with this smallness that has come to define my life, because in this small area, it's not conducive to riding horseback. And you've tried to convince yourself you're satisfied with that, and you've focused on trying to be satisfied with that very, very narrow space. Again, it's a useful skill, but again, there's a problem, isn't there? You're hemmed in. Now, as with those who love to get up on the saddle, not only are there certain skills that are handy for surviving there, and just like there are skills that you developed, and even though you didn't want to be one of those with your sword and your shield and galloping around and seeing everyone else that wasn't riding as an enemy, even though you're not there, you're on the ground trying to survive that madness. In addition to the skills, just like them, you've also developed habits. For instance, ours developed hours of writing of sorry, let me start over. Hours of living in an environment where others are thundering about, hours of surviving in such a land. Well, you've begun to see the world possibly as hostile, dangerous, lonely, small. You don't necessarily actively say that or think it, but it starts feeling that way. Hours of surviving in such a land may has caused you to habitually only give out trust, only give out love, only give out affection and connection. Very rarely. It's made you more reserved. It's made you have a tendency to naturally withhold rather than reach out. After all, you got to protect yourself. Understandable when you're living in a place where all the high horses are running about madly. But again, that has real downsides, doesn't it? Well, here's the thing. For those of you who really just love getting on your high horse, and for those of you who see just how short-sighted and dangerous and chaotic that is, and you've been trying to survive in a land where other people, so many, are riding high horses. Well, here's the reality for both of you. And by the way, I'm part both of you, so don't think I'm only talking to you. I'm talking to me. You don't live there anymore. That is not the land. In fact, we're not on land. Remember, we're adrift in the good ship Quarantine. Skills that were useful for thundering about the countryside, they become a problem on the deck of a ship. They're a problem here in this reality. They're even dangerous in this reality. They're limiting in this reality. Before, we were decrying how overly connected we were, and how we were getting more and more so. Oh, the social media. And trust me, I was one of the biggest voices, and I still know that there are problems with that. But all of a sudden, we're not in an overly connected world anymore. We're in an underconnected world. I am trying my best to embrace my presence on the web, to embrace those technologies, trying to curate them and carefully use them, learning new things. Because now the connections that I used to rely on face to face, I can't get those anymore. Now I can't go places and see the people that I used to see anymore. And it affects me. Sometimes it affects me in ways I'm not realizing. I called some of my students, my advisees, earlier, and I had to pause between phone calls because having to say goodbye to that student and realizing I wasn't get to see them or the others, for a moment I had to have a moment before I could make the next phone call. So it's affecting me, and I know it's probably affecting you too. And we know that we need others. When there's a surplus of others and and ways to connect to others, when we can find people at anytime we want, digitally or face to face, it's easy. We have the luxury of saying, I'm going to really just not avoid seeing people as much as I can. Because even in that world where there are horses galloping about and riders all around you, well, even when you're trying to seclude yourself, you can't be very secluded for very long a lot of times. Some of us can, I suppose, but not this level. And so all of a sudden, we used to live in an overly connected world. It was easy to fight. It was easy to separate ourselves, seclude ourselves off, and still have social interaction, still have relationships, still have people in our lives that love us and we love them, still be able to talk and have conversation. Guess what? You need that. Even if you think you're hermit material, we all need that interaction. It's been proven psychologically, medically, we need it. And now here we are faced in a new reality where almost the only connection I can have now is to this digital space. If the opportunities for connecting to people have been so severely limited, how wise is it to hold on to the hyper tribalism of the old way of existing? How wise is it to keep holding on to the ways of being on the lookout for someone who disagrees with you so you can keep yourself away from them? We're going to need each other now more than we ever did. And we really already did. These high horse habits, they're also a detriment in this new reality. They're a detriment in us as individuals. They're a detriment in society. Society, we're still coping. Because of the rapid pace at which things are changing, I am making sure that I check in with the news occasionally. I still manage it. I still don't want it to be 24/7, but I check in every day. Sometimes once in the morning, once in the evening. And I'm checking for news. I'm checking for information I can use for things that are going to let me know how my life is going to be affected, how my loved ones are going to be affected, not infected. Pray, please. And what I noticed is that there's a lot of great, useful stuff coming over there that's really keeping me apprised of things as they unfold. And I'm also noticing some of those old ways of being, still trying to hang on. Like I'm still noticing some news agencies on the left, who are, and not just the news agencies, but also politicians and others and leaders that are still, very focused on how leaders on the other side, especially the man at the top, the president, how he's getting things wrong, right? Of course they are. And on the right, still the same exact thing in the opposite direction, right? Yeah, they're still doing it. And when I see one of those headlines, I just sigh, roll my eyes, and say, okay, guys, I can't use that. That's not helping me. It's not helping me survive. It's not helping me protect my loved ones. It's not helping me do anything at all. It's making it harder. It's making it harder for me if I were to ingest it, to watch it, to read it, to allow it to sit there. It would make it harder for me to trust my neighbors. It would make it harder for me to see other people around me who are also scared and who are also trying to survive. It would make it hard for me to see them as fellow sufferers and fellow citizens and neighbors and brothers and sisters, and easier to see them as potential enemies, and easier to see them as someone who disagrees with me, who somehow is going to cause me harm. So not only do we have to learn new habits and new skills, but society at large is still adapting too. You see, we've entered a new season. Our text was that famous verse in Ecclesiastes that talked about to everything there's a season. We've entered a new season. And high horses, they're dangerous on the boat. We need to trade our high horse in for a big bucket, because there's going to be the storm's only going to get worse. There's going to be some water sloshing over the side. There's going to be some waves. And we're going to have to learn how to use different skills. We're going to have to trade our high horse for our bucket and learn how to use it. And because the water is going to be so much, because the storm could be so big, I mean, it's already well beyond what we predicted, right? Let's be honest. We're going to need other people to help us. They're also going to have to put a hand on that bucket. We're going to need to be able to use skills together, even with people we don't normally think of as friends and neighbors and that we agree with. We need all hands. right now. We need all hands on deck. Let me give you a real short phrase that I think you want to take to heart. Us must start to mean all. If we are going to survive this, when we say us, we better start thinking of it as synonymous with the word all. Because as long as us is followed closely in our minds by the word them, then we've forgotten that we're not in a battle with other people. We're in a battle with a storm that will sink us. We keep getting in our little scuffles left over from the old way of doing things, the old way of life. While the storm is raging on this boat, we're all going down. We've got to learn the important skill of ending that polarization that we built so many years and years and years building. We got to focus on ending polarization. And you want to know something? Ending polarization never happens as long as the sides are focused on how the other side is getting it wrong. If you are busy pointing and saying, well, we could if they didn't, you have already missed your opportunity. Your one opportunity to end the polarization is looking in the mirror and say, buddy, you need to learn to be more open-minded. You need to learn how to listen and quit jumping to conclusions. You need to learn how to let them talk even when they're disagreeing with you. Ending polarization never happens as long as you can only see how the other side is messing it up. Here's an important skill if we're going to survive this. We've got to get good at team building, not clique building, not tribe building, not party building, not camp building, not agenda building, not case building, but team building. By the way, let me tell you something about case building and about tribe building. I think back on my life and I tried to remember when I noticed the ability for those around me to start building tribes and building camps and building cliques and building sides. You know how far back you have to go in your life when you started noticing that? 4th or 5th grade? Middle school for sure. What does that tell you about that particular skill? It's natural to adolescents, younger adolescents. It's natural to children. In other words, it doesn't take a lot of skill. Anybody, and too many are good at that. Team building. When I think back at the examples of real teams that I saw, I realized that I was a little older and my peers were a little older when we finally were able to do that. And then we had to have someone like a coach or a teacher to guide us along and show us how to get along and work hand in hand. So if you want to be proud of your accomplishment, learn to team build. Anybody can tribe build. Anybody can build a case against the other guy. That's easy. Team building. That's what we need right now. Ships don't sail with a bunch of individuals. Ships sail with a team. Another skill for surviving this new reality is we've got to learn to listen long. Listen long. Not just enough time to get the gist, You may think you got the gist, and then they keep talking, but you're not hearing them. And then it becomes obvious you didn't really get the essence of what they were saying. So listen long, not just long enough to get the gist, not just to when they say something you disagree with, not just to when you find a place to make your point or have your say, not just long enough to say you listened. No, listen long. Listen long. And for those of us who really like to talk, not only do we all need to learn to listen long, but maybe some of us need to learn how to talk short. Talk short enough to grant others a voice. Talk short enough to convey what you have to say and stop. If it is your tendency to keep talking and building a case, that is not about collaboration. That is not about cooperation. That is about winning arguments. That is about making your point known. That's the old way. That fits in tribalism. That fits in an adversarial relationship. It doesn't fit where people are interested in hearing each other. When you keep talking, adding point by point, layer by layer, and trying to convince me, you're sending a lot of messages. Some of them you don't intend to send. One of them is you're not really interested in hearing me. You're interested in me hearing you. So we need to be willing to listen long, and we need to be willing to talk short. That doesn't mean clam up. That doesn't mean keep your opinion to yourself. That means you need to care that everyone else also has a voice in equal time. Here's another skill. And I think a lot of us, some of us, have used this skill in the past. But in the old world, we were losing that skill. We weren't, in fact, we were neglecting that skill just to survive, possibly. But we got to try trusting again. Even, and not even if. We know. There have been times we said, I'm going to trust. I'm going to reach out. And in that world where everyone was on their high horse, boy, did we regret it. Boy, were they incapable of seeing why we were doing what we were doing, of reading our hearts. All they could see is how our message or our point, how it was different from theirs. But we're living in a new world now. And even if we're not good at it and they're not good at it, we better develop the skill again, because we need each other. We need each other. So let's try trusting again. 1 Peter 3, verses 8 and 9 says, finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another, loving as brothers, be tenderhearted. I love the way Peter doesn't say, to hope you're tenderhearted or act. No, he doesn't. I think it's some thing that just happens to you or just naturally that way. It's some people are tenderhearted, some people aren't. No, Peter doesn't give you that out. If you're sitting there saying, well, I'm just not a loving person, Peter doesn't care. He tells you to be that way anyway. Be tenderhearted. That's a command. That's an imperative style sentence. You be tenderhearted. Be courteous. Whether you're good at it or not, work on it. Not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling. Any playground set of cliques can do that. But on the contrary, blessing. Knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. Excuse me. Be of one mind. That same imperative structure was there from the beginning of that verse. All of you be of one mind. We better work on working this ship together. Even if you don't like me, even if you think I'm off the wall, and my opinions are baseless, and I'm out to lunch. You're going to need me on that bucket. I'm going to need you on that bucket. I'm going to need you on that helm. I'm going to need you on the lookout. We're going to need each other, even if back on land you were riding for the other side. See, high horses, they're dangerous on the boat. And whether we want to be here or not, whether we liked that way of life before or not, we're not there anymore. I love you. Let's join hands. Let's man our positions. All hands on deck. And let's try to sail through this storm together. Take care. I'll talk to you again next week.